Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maddie and I love to read and review books, and I thought that doing a July reading wrap-up sounded good since I'm trying to get back into trying to do long-form content on top of my short-form content. And so yeah, let's get into what I read in July and kind of a little bit about the books and what I thought of them. So I had a horrible reading slump. I tried to pick up so many books this month and put them down, and it definitely wasn't the books. It was 1000% me. I no idea, but so many people, a lot of my friends that I talked to, they all also were in reading slumps, and so I don't really know what was going on in the air in July, but I definitely didn't read what I had planned and didn't read as much as I usually do. So with that though, I am happy to say that I did read 6 books, which all things considered is awesome. So yeah, let's go ahead and just kind of get into it. I'm going to talk about them in the order in which I read them versus any other order, I guess. But anyway, so the first book that I was able to actually complete in July was Ladies of the Night by Fiona Marchbank. This was an ARC that I received from NetGalley, and it is a graphic novel that follows a lady knight and her squire, and essentially this lady knight is kind of notorious for being rude and grumpy and all about winning. She usually doesn't have a squire because she treats them like crap, and her wife actually is the one that says, no, enough's enough, you need a squire. I'm sick of you taking care of all of your stuff or making the people in our house take over all of the stuff. And so her wife hires a squire who is just so tenacious. She will do absolutely anything to become a knight, and she'll even put up with the grumpiest of grumpy knights in order to become a squire and to enroll kind of in this knight school. And honestly, I had a really good time. The art was beautiful. The story was a lot of fun. I feel like it was just kind of the right thing to get the ball rolling for me reading-wise, to read something quick and short so that I felt a sense of accomplishment that I read something, and also to remind myself of kind of the very niche genre of lady knights that I do truly enjoy. So that really helped me kind of get the ball rolling with what else I read for the rest of the month. And then next I jumped into Fabulous Bodies by Chuck Tingle. I had a really good time reading this book. I even annotated it just a little bit. I kind of was just keeping track of certain character developments and where it was the most gory. And basically this book follows a single mother who kind of is trying to be a fashion influencer, but it doesn't always pay the bills. And so by night she is a grave robber, and one day her kind of idol, Eddie, who is a singer, who seems kind of the equivalent of an Elvis, he dies, and she gets offered a lot of money to go and collect his body. The problem is that Eddie wakes up and a night of terror is unleashed around her. This was such a fun time. I did think the ending fell just a little bit flat for me, but overall I would still highly recommend this book. It was so fun and heartwarming despite how gory it really was. It was really, really good. This is the first Chuck Tingle book I've ever read, and it made me definitely want to check out other Chuck Tingle books. So I am really excited to look into his backlog. Trigger warnings, it is extremely gory. This is not for the faint of heart. And then next, I was trying to find an audiobook that I could listen to at work that just kept me entertained, and I was still kind of in a reading slump, and I already had the audiobook of Enchantra and I just hadn't gotten to it yet, so I jumped in and I am so glad I did. I honestly enjoyed this way more than I thought I was going to. The audiobook is also amazing. Enchantra, in case you don't know or haven't heard me blab about it yet, is the sequel to Phantasma. This follows Genevieve, who who is the sister of Ophelia, and Phantasma follows Ophelia and her kind of love story, and Enchantra follows Genevieve and her kind of love story, and she basically has to survive several nights of hell with this cursed family, and in order to stay alive she has to marry one of the sons from this family. It was so good, so fun, and for me personally, this was one of the few times that I felt like an epilogue was like done right for a book and also set up the next book so well. If you're looking for a dark fantasy gothic romance, I would highly recommend checking out this series. The third book comes out this year, I do believe, and so I'm really looking forward to it. And then next I read The Kings of Kearny by Navessa Allen. On my kind of short form content, I rolled a die for it to pick my next read, and it just so happened to be this book. And you know, I'm actually really excited that I got to read this when I did. It was kind of like the perfect timing, being in a reading slump and just trying to find fun and entertaining things to read. The Kings of Kearny follows a woman who moves to a small town in Texas because she is relocating her grandmother to a kind of like old age home to help take care of her and her Alzheimer's. And the town they move to is kind of run by this motorcycle club called the Kings of Kearny, and she ends up kind of in a one-night stand / fake relationship with kind of one of the enforcers of this motorcycle club, and it turns out to be this kind of drug smuggling motorcycle gang, like forced proximity storyline and romance. And honestly, it was a good time. It was definitely kind of one of those like brain off type romances, definitely a heavily inspired Sons of Anarchy fanfiction. So if you loved the Sons of Anarchy and are looking for something with similar romance vibes, or like similar vibes to Sons of Anarchy with like literally just about a romance, I would highly recommend checking this out. Otherwise though, if you're not into motorcycle kind of club books, you probably wouldn't enjoy this. Yeah. And then I read Strange Buildings by Uketsu. I really enjoyed Strange Pictures and Strange Houses, and so I actually bought this back when it first came out, I think in February, and it just, sometimes when you're too excited for a book, at least in my opinion, sometimes you're too excited for a book, you just don't want to read it. And since I was in this reading slump and I was trying to look for things that I knew I was going to love and I knew I was going to enjoy, I jumped into this one and I did have a really good time. I think that this honestly was like if Strange Pictures and Strange Houses like had a baby, it would be Strange Buildings, and it was a really good time. If for some reason you're unfamiliar with Uketsu, he basically writes these kind of psychological horror books, basically either through Strange Pictures or Strange Houses. He kind of ends up intertwining stories that seem like they have nothing to do with each other into an overarching picture and story that you're like, wow, I couldn't even have thought of that, or how these two things could have possibly been connected. So these are just super fun mystery thriller type books. In my opinion, you don't really need to read like Strange Pictures or Strange Houses in any particular order. I will say you probably should read Strange Houses though before you read Strange Buildings. He does reference Strange Houses, but not enough that you would feel lost. So quite honestly, you could pick up any Uketsu book and start and be totally fine. I had a great time. If you don't like things though that seem a bit outlandish in your like mysteries and thrillers, then this might not be for you. But overall, it was still a fun time to kind of try and figure out the mystery before the end of the book. So I had a good time. And then the sixth and final book that I read in July was Vow of Eternal Night. This was a NetGalley ARC that I received, and it was supposed to be a standalone dark fantasy romance book. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but make it vampires. And while it was a kind of fun, cutesy story and was very gothic, it felt much more like a young adult novel than it did an adult novel. I feel like there were a lot of plot points and things like that that just felt a bit more like I was reading a kind of like young adult novel that was meant for like older, like young adults. And yeah, so it was gothic. I don't think it was super dark fantasy. I didn't feel like it had the same elements to it, even though it was about vampires, that it did feel a bit more like campy than it did like actually dark fantasy. But overall, it was just a cute read. I don't think I'd necessarily recommend it unless you specifically like reading vampire romances or fairy tale retellings, and or don't mind young adult romances. I'm kind of on the fence about it. It was still a good time though. I read it in like a couple days. It was only like 300 pages. But yeah, kind of a mixed review on that one. I didn't love it, didn't hate it. So there's that. So yeah, that was everything I read in July. Not a super big list, but I honestly had a really good time despite the fact that I was in a reading slump and really couldn't figure out like what the mood or vibe was. I really overall liked everything that I read, even if it was a bit of a maybe or like I'm on the fence about it. I still had a good time. So I am super stoked that I had a good reading month, and I'm really looking forward to August. I'm building my August TBR right now. I'm a little behind, so I am working on that. I'm hoping to finalize that, and I hope to share it with you soon. And yeah, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I would love to chat more about books. If you have read any of these or agree or disagree with my takes, let me know. I would love to chat about it. And yeah, I hope you have a great one and happy reading. Bye!